Hello, welcome along. So, Shadrak Meduson, who is he, and why do I think he's the most influential Iron Hand of the Heresy era, and perhaps one of the most influential characters of the Heresy? The Iron Hands are one of the first legions to kind of get involved in fighting the traitors, as Fulgrim reveals to Horus Manus that he's gone traitor, he's become a traitor. That he reveals what Horus is doing, and he tries to get Ferrus to join them. Now, this obviously ultimately fails. Ferrus refuses to join them, and to cut a long story short, Fulgrim goes back to Isfahan to meet Horus and tell him that he hasn't been able to turn Ferrus at all. I mean, and he hasn't killed him. Ferrus, of course, immediately pursues Fulgrim. So he gathers up what he can of his legion, who are ready to go as quickly as possible, and chases after Fulgrim to Isfahan. Now, by now, the heresy has been revealed, and other legions have been sent to apprehend Horus as well. And they all converge on Isfahan 5, fortunately, exactly the right time, that they all arrive around the same time. And this consists of famously 7 legions, 3 of them loyalists, and 4 of them will be revealed to also be traitors. Now, at this stage, when they arrive, obviously, the loyalists are in the dark. They don't realize that the other 4 legions are also traitors. And Ferrus takes the lead amongst the Primarchs that are there, those 7, and decides that the best thing to do is to attack immediately without any plans. So he orders a drop, basically, of of 3 legions in a first wave, which is with his own Iron Hands, which is the majority of his legion, although a smaller force is still following behind a bit slower, estimated to be about a third, so something like maybe 20 to 30,000. And the Raven Guard and the Salamanders will come down with him, and they will launch the attack against the traitors, and then the other 4 will form a second wave. Now, of course, this perfectly suits Horus's plan, because the other 4 are traitors, and they will then attack the loyalists from behind, and they'll wipe them out. So Ferrus falls straight into this trap. He takes his legion, and as I said, the Salamanders and Raven Guard with him. They land, and again, immediately he just wants to attack. He doesn't want to really think about how he might use the other 2 legions with him to suit them, or consider the advice of the other 2 Primarchs. He basically just thinks, no, we have to attack immediately, and that's all he's thinking about. Straight up the middle, destroy traitors, kill Fulgrim. So he does this. Now, the other 2 legions they're not very pleased with this, and they tend to hold back a little bit, trying to not be as rash and think about what's going on, try to conserve their forces, not just blindly follow him up the middle. And this means that the Iron Hands take the brunt of the first engagement, and it does also mean in the longer term that it will lead to the Iron Hands feeling quite a lot of resentment towards the other 2 legions, who feel that they didn't really support Ferrus enough, and it somewhat led to him being killed. Now, of course, that's not really fair, because in fact it was his own complete lack of tactics and lack of control that led to that. But that's the way the Iron Hands, or at least some of them, feel. So now, of course, the events that happen after this are very well known. So Ferrus is killed by Fulgrim. Most of the 3 legions that have landed are wiped out on the ground, and a small force do escape, mostly bits and pieces getting away, randomly, really with a lot of luck with their, taking gunships back up into orbit to get to some of the ships, but a lot of them are just killed on the way up. Considerably later, a small group of Raven Guard with Koroks are rescued by a Raven Guard fleet, but that's a separate encounter, and a few thousand, probably a couple of thousand Raven Guard get off the planet with Koroks that way. But the ones that get away at the point of the actual battle, they end up getting back to orbit, and they find essentially the traitor fleets are now smashing their fleet. The smaller loyalist fleet is now being wiped out, and that includes this sort of second wave of slower moving Iron Hands who arrived later than Ferrus's main force. And amongst that force is Shadrak Meduson. So he's a company captain, quite senior, but not actually in the Legion's overall leadership, top tier leadership. So at this point, at least. So now it's obvious from at this point for those ship captains that they're going to lose this battle, and they're very rapidly losing ships in ship actions and boarding actions, etc. And it starts to break down into a basically everyone for themselves situation, and the ship captains each have to make a decision what they're going to do. Now, of course, it goes completely against Iron Hand's doctrine and really personality to retreat from this situation, especially as there would be abandoning the bulk of their legion on the surface and their Primarch. So it takes a lot for them to get to the decision that it's time to run, but they eventually do. And so a combined force of Iron Hands with a few Salamanders, a few Raven Guard do escape. Now it's estimated that force is probably around 20,000. That's what it's stated in the Horus Heresy books. So that force gets away and sort of attempts to regroup. And when they do that, they have to decide, well, what's going to happen now? So they've just gone through probably the biggest shock of their existence. They've lost their Primarch. They've seen loyal Primarchs turn traitor, and their other legions turning traitor. Something that was completely unimaginable, really, a few days before this. And they then have to decide, well, given all the losses we've taken, the fact that we don't have the Primarch, how do we even run things now? So at that point, a group who are they're known as clan fathers, who they're basically the senior leader in each of the clans, and the Iron Hands are a clan structure, which comes back to their home planet, where that's how society was organised there, and it carried on within the Legion once Ferrus took over, but it kind of became less important as the more sort of military structure started to be introduced from the Imperium, but it still remained there. So these clan fathers have quite a strong role within the legions in terms of kind of providing advice and leadership. These clan fathers decide that they're going to take control, and they kind of set up a council where they basically decide that that the legions should be organised along the clan structure lines, and each clan will be led by their clan father. As a whole, they'll appoint one war leader who will sort of coordinate overall operations. So in a sense, of a replacement for what Ferrus would have done. And so they pick the overall war leader from Shadrak Meduson's clan. Now that his clan father, Jebez Org, becomes the overall war leader of the group. And that's kind of to make up for the fact that they also basically give that clan Sorgel, I hope I pronounced that correctly, the stragglers from the other two legions, because they don't really want anything to do with them. The other parts of the Iron Hands, they don't. As I said, they kind of felt like quite resentful against the other two legions, that they didn't really pull their weight and didn't attack quickly enough and aggressively enough, and that's why Ferrus died. And although that's unjustified, it's just that's the way they feel at this point. So all of these stragglers from the Salamanders and Raven Guard are put with Clan Sorgel, and so are the Clan Averni, who are the clan that are responsible for basically they form they're the most senior clan, and they form the bodyguard of Ferrus Manus. And because most of those died on the planet, there's very few of them left. And the ones that did survive, again, are kind of shunned because the Legion feel like, well, you're supposed to have died with the Primarch. Basically, if you didn't die with him, you can't have been fighting hard enough. So they are basically put with Clan Sorgel as well. So the other reason that they're put into Clan Sorgel is because Shadrak Meduson is one of the bigger voices amongst that clan, is advocating for trying to change the ways of the Legion, adapting and embracing the other two legions and sort of adapting their tactics. And this doesn't go down well with the clan fathers, who want to stick strictly to Iron Hand's doctrine. And so they just say, well, if you want them, you can have them, put them all together. And also, by the way, you can have these guys that didn't really do their job properly. You're all together now. But to make up for that, because they do have some level of empathy, they say, well, okay, your clan father can be the overall war leader. But they still have a lot of influence as a group, so that's probably why they accept that to happen, because if he ever makes a decision that they disagree with, they will just overrule him as a group. So once they've done this, the next thing they do is they basically get a message that seems to be from more Iron Hands who survived, and they decide they're going to go and link up with these Iron Hands, and that turns out to be a pretty bad decision. So they essentially walk into a trap set by the Lunar Walls or Sons of Horus. They lose a lot more of their ships, a lot more people, a lot more Astartes, and most importantly, they lose the Clan Fathers, or at least most of them, who are mostly on one ship where they were kind of commanding from. That means that there's a big void in the leadership of the Legion, and because Jebez Org he's not only he's not killed, he's severely injured to the point where he can't really command anymore. This means that by default, Shadrak Meduson takes command because he was his second. Now he's got command of this whole group. The obstacles to his ideas are out of the way, the Clan Fathers, and people start to listen to him more and think, well, okay, maybe he's onto something here, because they thought we'd stick rigidly to the Iron Hands old ways, and we lost again, and they all died. So they're starting to swing people around his way of thinking. So he decides, well, the best way for us to do anything here is not group together too much, because as soon as we do that, that's what the traitors want. They can finish us off in one big battle, and with no chance of us winning. So we need to basically adopt unconventional warfare tactics, the classic, the tactics of hit and run, that guerrilla warfare, the kind of thing that small freedom fighter or terrorist groups use throughout human history to fight against bigger forces, and that's what he decides needs to happen. Now, he takes a lot of advice from the other legions, the Salamanders, but particularly the Raven Guard, who are experts in this kind of warfare, advise him a lot, and he wants to incorporate those tactics into the Iron Hands way of fighting now. And so he does that, and he develops these smaller groups that will have very little communication with each other, which are called cells. Again, a term used when we talk about various terrorist groups or freedom fighters. Obviously, that depends on your perspective of those groups. So he uses these tactics where it's very hard if you're trying to kill them. If you kill one group, you can't really find out anything useful about the other cells, because the information exchange between the cells is very limited. And he also uses tactics which were designed to draw out the enemy into to operating across a wide area and not be able to concentrate their forces. So they're constantly being harassed from the flanks and the rear, losing supply ships and supply dumps, the communication arrays and things like that. So they're constantly having to go and investigate these problems, try and send troops to eliminate whoever's doing this, and it just stretches them out, slows them down, bleeds them slowly, and that's his tactic. So his long-term tactic is, how can I delay the attack on Terra? Basically, I'm just going to be a thorn in their side, slow them down, and just drain them of much resources as I can over a period of time. He knows that long-term that's not going to stop them, but he also realizes that every moment of time he can save for Terra to build up its defenses, for other legions to gather and go to Terra to join the defense, increases the chance of the victory for the Imperium and Horus to fail. So he realizes that's his long-term goal. But in the shorter term, he decides, well, also what I can try and do is decapitate the enemy, eliminate Horus, and the heresy might stop. So he comes up with a few plans to try and ambush Horus and kill him. None of them really work, but one in particular, he almost works. So he actually comes as close to anybody probably during the heresy as to killing Horus until the Emperor. Horus is on a planet, I think it's Dwell, where he's basically just conquered the planet, and he is meeting with Mortarion and Fulgrim, and he's kind of giving them his next orders of what he wants to happen, and about an invasion of another planet. And so they're there with, I think, a few of their senior Astartes, and they get ambushed by a force of fire raptors, which are a type of sort of a helicopter stand-in, an attack aircraft. That three of these attack very suddenly, and they manage to really severely damage quite a few of the three Primarchs and their Astartes. I don't think it actually kills anybody. It might kill some of the Astartes, but none of the senior ones, none of the named characters, the big characters at least. But it does, and obviously it doesn't kill they don't manage to kill one of the Primarchs, but they come very close, and they kind of shock the traitors into realizing that they're not as invulnerable as they thought they were, and start to get them thinking about, oh, actually, what would have happened if Horus had actually been killed. And so, like I say, that's probably the closest anyone comes to doing that. So I think my general point is, so Shadrak Meduson, he is a visionary leader. He managed to see outside of the box of that. He's been brought up in this society of the Iron Hands. This training, the indoctrination, his Primarch, the way his Primarch looks at the world, the way that everyone in his legion looks at the world. So he breaks free from that and decides, no, we've got to embrace new ideas, new ways of doing things. We've got to ditch some of these old ideas, and that actually some of the things we did in the past led to our failure on Isvan. And he, particularly taking on new tactics from the Raven Guard and integrating those ideas. So he's not fully just saying, no, we should just be like the Raven Guard. He's trying to combine the tactics to kind of create a combined arms force to operate in a way that complements all the elements of those forces and make smaller forces that are more agile, more flexible. And in many ways, this is foreshadowing the creation of the Codex Astartes by Guilliman, and the chapter structure of roughly 1,000 men, and a much more flexible combined arms force. And he's doing that off his own back without, he's not a Primarch. Although compared to a human, obviously an Astartes is a very impressive individual, he's going up against multiple traitor Primarchs and surviving, not individual combat, but in his war. He's putting his own name out there as well. He builds up this reputation. They always to focus the traitors on his name, to try and build up this idea of this boogeyman who's out there somewhere, and to try and draw their attention onto him and slow them down again. This is also kind of a psychological warfare aspect. And like I say, he's very successful at this. Now, ultimately, he like most people in the heresy, he does eventually die. But he achieves his aims at least his long-term aim, which was draining the traitors enough, slowing them down enough that they take years to gather their forces together, build up enough power in one place to go and attack Terra. And during that time, of course, the fortification of Terra has a lot longer to be developed. Other legions and other forces, Titan legions and Knight households, and probably tens of millions of Imperial army and navy are drawn into Terra to protect it, which he's a big part of allowing that time for that to all develop. Because as I said, the heresy is kind of weird. It starts very dramatically with this big, huge battle at Isfahan, where you've got this wiping out 3 legions, but then it actually really drags on for several years before anything really happens. And it's that period, that sort of in between period, where his actions go a big part to why it takes so long for Horus to get his arse in gear and actually go and attack Terra. Now, of course, he's not the only one doing this. The White Skulls are doing a lot of this, and probably more so because there's more of them under the Khan, and a small group of Raven Guard are doing this with Korux, of course. So, what do you think? Shadrak Meduson, is he as important as I say for the heresy? Have you heard of him before? What did you think of him? How much of an influence did his ideas have on Guilliman's later ideas? Obviously, we know Guilliman was working on ideas all of his life. That's what he does. But did the chapter structure was it directly influenced by Shadrak Meduson's success? That's an interesting idea, I think. So like, share, subscribe. Thank you very much. See you next time.